Most of us sitting here in this church probably came to be Christians at a very, very young age. Weeks, months after our birth. Very much like the baptism we are about to celebrate this morning. And so all of our lives, we have been Christian. We have grown up surrounded by Christian parents, and godparents, and family and friends. We have lived the life of Christianity, and it's become a part of who we are. Most of us probably did not go through a major conversion experience where we were unbelievers or did not believe in God, and all of a sudden came to that realization, I need to be baptized in order to be saved. I do believe in God. And that means something. That gift of baptism, that gift of faith that we immerse ourselves in at such a young age begins to work on us and change us from the very beginning, so that our life isn't disjointed, but rather it continues on, and it is what we know. We know what it means to be Christian, not in comparison to what it doesn't, but simply what it does mean to be Christian. And that is a great lesson. As Jesus today reveals or asks his disciples, who do you say that I am? That is the question that is posed to every one of us who claim to be believers. Who do you say that I am? Am I just another teacher? Am I just some wise man? Am I someone who is a philosopher, or maybe even a wonder worker, a healer even? Who do you say that I am? Who am I for you? That's the important question. And it is Peter who gives voice to the church's answer. You are the Christ of God, the Messiah. You are the anointed one. You are the one who is sent to be our Savior. I believe that. I profess my faith in that. And as fine and as dandy as that is, Jesus doesn't stop there. Because words are not enough. We can say one thing and do a completely different thing. We can say, I believe in Jesus. I believe in God. I have this faith. I profess that faith even. And if we do not then act upon it, if we do not then live it, then we have no faith. It really is not a faith. To speak the words are one thing. But to say, I believe in God, I believe in Jesus Christ, well, that makes me a Christian for these 3 seconds it took to say that. And now what? The reality is our faith is not solely professed in words, but rather our faith is and must be professed in action. It must be professed in our lives. Jesus, in gathering his disciples together, particularly the 12, he made them live with him, walk with him, journey with him for 3 years. Because that is how he was going to teach them how to be Christian, how to be the faithful followers of him and of his Father. He didn't sit down and write a book. He didn't put together a list of instructions. Instead, he gathered his disciples with him, and they simply lived it. And when he ascended into heaven, and the apostles were sent out to the corners of the earth, go and announce the good news, go and proclaim the gospel, not a one of them began writing it down. Not a one of them began putting together the instruction manual. The first gospel isn't written until 40 years after Jesus ascends into heaven. 40 years. Why didn't they need it? Because their mode of teaching the Christian faith was not by handing someone a book, but rather teaching them how to live it. That's how all of us learned how to be Christian. That's how our families become Christian. We don't just speak it. We don't just read about it. We live it. And we live a particular habit and a particular rhythm of Christian faith. And it's that habit and it's that rhythm that begins to open us up. By professing our faith in our actions, by maintaining a daily prayer life, by coming to Sunday Eucharist week after week, by doing works of charity and responding to others' needs, by forgiving others regularly and asking forgiveness, this rhythm creates a certain openness. We call that sanctifying grace. That God's grace pours out upon us, and the more we participate with it, the more we get into the groove of it, the more we're able to respond to it. You know how it is. You skip Mass once, it becomes so much easier to do it the next time. It becomes so much easier to do it the next time. And all of a sudden we realize we are not Christian any longer. When we stop practicing, we cease to be believers. Because being a believer is not just the spoken word. It is the life of a lived Christian. It is our actions that define who we are. Am I a believer? Do I stand for this, or do I not? These habits, these graces, strengthen us over time, and it becomes something that is ingrained in our hearts. And while it may be difficult to build the habit, nevertheless, once that habit is built, it becomes harder and harder to fall from it. And it's not just a psychological habit, but it's also a spiritual habit. Grace builds on nature, St. Thomas Aquinas says. If we do something with our bodies, if we do something with our humanity, God is going to heap grace upon that and make it blossom into something more. And so it is the daily ritual, the yearly ritual, the weekly ritual that we get into that opens us up to our faith. And so Jesus tells his disciples then, you believe in me? Well, good for you. But now let me tell you this. You must pick up a cross and follow me daily. Not just once, not just a few times, but every single day. You must pick up that cross and follow after me. It is this perseverance that makes our faith real. And that is the perseverance that you and I are called to enter into. Because God doesn't hand us the cross. God doesn't give us the cross. A cross is formed by a contradiction of wills. God's will versus our will, or humanity's will. And then we encounter the cross. If we were just to accomplish God's will, it would be not so difficult. But we live in a fallen world. We live in a fallen humanity. And so sometimes the world pushes against God's will. Sometimes our own hearts and our own minds push against God's will. And that's where we encounter the cross. That's the cross, the contradiction of God's will. And what Jesus says is you have to push that contradiction. You have to carry that contradiction. Because if you give up God's will to make the cross go away, then you're left dead. Then you are left simply here in the world. And you've given up your faith. But to push that faith means the cross will continue to be there. And we have to carry it. It's not always easy, but it is a blessing. Because it is that cross that gives us life. This has huge ramifications for us today. The bishops of the United States, as you may or may not know, have called us to once again keep a fortnight for freedom. 2 weeks before our Independence Day, to pray specifically for our nation that her freedoms and the rights and dignity that belong to all people be upheld, particularly the freedom of religion. That we are free to practice our faith out there. That our faith is not just something that is spoken and kept within these walls, but that we're able to live our faith. And you know, more and more, the world, our nation, our country, people that we encounter, it's becoming harder to be a Christian. And I think one day it's going to be almost bad to profess Christianity in the public sphere, because it so contradicts the values that are out there in the world. And I look for the day in my own lifetime when we as priests will be pressured what we can or cannot say here in the sanctuary, because it will be regarded as discrimination or bias or illegal. That day is coming. The only way Christianity survives is by faithful people who live it. You and I hold the next generation of Christians in our hands. It is going to be by our example and our life that the next generation of Christians will know what it means to be a Christian. What they will know what it means to live Christianity. Not just to say it, because words evaporate. To live it. To make the choices day in and day out. As we celebrate this baptism today, time and time again, as we do with every baptism, we ask the parents, are you going to teach your children how to practice their faith? Are you going to make them practice their faith? Because that is how the faith goes on to the next generation. You could give them every book written, you could make them watch every educational DVD, you could put them through every program out there, and it's not going to make faith happen. The only thing that makes faith happen is participation in the grace of Jesus Christ, the rhythm and the practice of that faith. So Jesus asked you that question today. Who do you say that I am? Answer him not just with your lips, but with your lives. You will encounter the cross as your will, God's will, and the world's will run into each other. But that is the cross that gives us life. The next generation of Christians and the salvation of the world depends upon it.